So the next methods, I would suggest using either a scrap sheet of newsprint, but what I think is even better is using a sheet of your Mylar paper, which is either clear lay, Mylar, acetate, the thin sheet of plastic that you can draw on with a Sharpie. And what's great about this is that it's totally reusable for multiple projects. So if you have something with a completely new dimension later on, you can use denatured alcohol or isopropyl alcohol and essentially erase the Sharpie marker, which I'll just do a little bit. Always wear gloves. So as you can see, it comes off pretty easily. So good to know for if you ever need to remove Sharpie, but it can affect certain surfaces. So if you ever need to remove it from something else that's important, like furniture, you would want to be very careful because that might remove varnishes. What I do is just the same as before. We found these measurements for our block. First, I drew the paper size, and so from there, it was easy for me to find the center of the paper and then work in reverse to find where this was placed. Now, you can do that either with your ruler and a little bit of math, or something that I did was I partway eyeballed it with the marks on the grid of my cutting mat. So what I had done was line this up with some measurements, place this over, and I still used my ruler for making marks. So once I placed this, I used my ruler to ensure that I had a straight line and kind of trace the outline of my paper. And so once I had my paper, 11 divided by 2 is 5.5. So I found the center mark of 11 here, line that up. 8.5 divided by 2 is 4.25. So I found that, or I guess working from the corner. So you can use your cutting mat as a way to help line things up. 4.25 right here, drew that. And so that found my center mark. So once I had the center here, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So measuring out from the center, I could put a mark here and a mark here, and drew out from 3 inches, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So 2 inches up, 2 inches down. And what I did is I didn't go all the way across because that seemed like a lot, but I did leave a little bit of a mark out here coming out of the squares that I drew, so that sometimes that will help me see if it's lined up that way by having just a little bit on the outside. So once I drew that, I wrote back here, and I usually end up flipping this over because then I can clean this if I get ink on this pretty easily without worrying about scratching off the Sharpie on the other side. So this is great for that. You might have noticed I have some squiggly lines too. This doesn't really apply if you have completely straight paper, but with printmaking paper, sometimes we have this large 22 by 30 inch sheet that often has what's called a deckled edge. And so I personally like the deckled edges to go a certain direction. I prefer them, if I'm reading the final print, for the deckled edges to be either along the bottom or the right side, kind of like, at least in English, kind of following the direction that we read, having this straight and then the decals kind of flowing off at the end of our writing. So that's just what makes more sense to me. So if I have a torn edge or a deckled edge, I often leave it towards the bottom. Like this, I think it's torn on all sides and has one deckled edge. So in the end, because that, remember, things kind of flip, so I just kind of make a mark for where I want a deckled edge. So if you're using a straight paper, you don't have to do that. One thing I do is I add a marking T for a top. So for me, just in case I'm doing a whole edition and maybe these measurements are just a hair off for some reason, so long as I keep things consistent rather than like turning this up and down, that just kind of helps make sure that my prints are more consistent. especially if, like, say this is off by a hair or something. So this is probably one of the easiest methods that's reusable. Once you have it set up, it's golden. So this is good for an edition where you have paper all of the same size, a unified size. So imagine I'm inking this up and I go to print. I can, taking my paper fingers, and sometimes I'll mark one corner to try to consistently measure from. So in case things are a little bit off, so maybe I'll hover, maybe I'll line it up with this corner and set it down and go to print.